All right, good afternoon to you. 4:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Josh Hammer joins us. We'll talk about the left's attempts to take down every single attorney who's ever tried to work to advance the good causes of the United States. It's unbelievable. They really are going wild. Josh Hammer's got that. And then Jay Richards will be with us coming up at 5:30. We talk about that solar eclipse, what you need to know as the celestial bodies fly past each other. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden, leaving the White House today, was asked whether or not he threatened Israel, threatened them. Here is how he answered that question in his own doddering way.
Pardon me?
Did you threaten to stop military aid to Israel?
I asked them to do what they're doing.
Wait, what? He said he asked them to do what they're doing? That was the answer to the question? Did you threaten to stop military aid to Israel? I asked them to do what they're doing.
Do what they're doing.
Are you abandoning Israel? They screamed as he walked away, refusing to answer. He abandoned them as he was refusing to answer that question. For more on what the heck is even happening in the world right now, let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He's the president of the London Center for Policy Research and a CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer as well. Sir, good to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince, always great to be with you. Thank you.
So Joe Biden got on the phone yesterday with Benjamin Netanyahu. The White House was really eger to brag about how tough he was with the Israeli prime minister, saying it was a tense phone call, that he threatened to cut off aid to Israel unless they start an immediate ceasefire with Hamas. This call a lot tougher than the one apparently he had with Xi Jinping earlier in the week, where he sucked up to the Chinese president. What do you make of the White House's posture towards Israel this week?
So to that point, Vince, it's very clear that Biden is more concerned about percentage points in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota regarding his potential reelection than he is what's best for the Israelis or Western civilization. That's what this is all about. And even if he didn't directly admit to threatening Netanyahu, Vice President Kamala Harris, who apparently was on the call, did threaten him. She did say within the last 10 days that there would be consequences to the Israeli, to the relationship with the Israelis, to include some undetermined penalty if they don't do what they're told to do by this administration. So this is very dangerous. I don't think this is going to get them, that is the Biden administration, what they think it is, because ultimately I see folks, even who are Democrats, traditionally Democrats, saying that if this administration does not support the Jewish state, I think you're going to see some very big donors depart from supporting this administration.
Listen, can we talk about the nature of the fighting in Gaza for a moment? Because at the center of this is, I think there's some genuine concern about the status of civilian life there. But the reality here is that Hamas uses civilian deaths in order to both protect their operations as well as to advance their PR cause. What can you tell us about that, the way that Hamas operates and how unusual it is in terms of combatants?
Well, think about what's already in the public domain regarding what happened in the West Bank prior to the 7 October attacks. Vince, the people of the Palestinian area there of the Gaza Strip were given billions of dollars via UNRWA. We've come to find that UNRWA, the UN organization supporting those people, was at least 10% of them were actually Hamas operatives. And then all those resources, materials, and other things provided were turned, instead of into civil action projects, into weapons used against the Israelis. So even before we get to whatever's going on now, we know that Hamas was not willing to actually allow the Palestinian people to use those resources. So that's the first thing. So now we fast forward, we have the attack, the Israelis respond, and now we have millions of people in the Gaza Strip who are still being essentially subjugated to Hamas. That's one of the reasons this administration is trying to build this so-called, pier to provide support, to provide food, because Hamas continues to use resources to not benefit the Palestinian people, but to use them to subjugate the Palestinian people and use them for essentially operations against the Israelis. So no matter how you cut it to this point, Hamas has not benefited the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people, by the way, voted Hamas into power. And I just don't think there's anything that we owe the Palestinian people at this point regarding support. They've acted horribly, given resources by the United States and others regarding not being willing to actually get along with the Jewish state. So, I'm cry me a river here, Vince. I'm just not into the idea that we need to give any deference to them at this point in time.
Well, the Israelis, the way they're reacting to all of this, I mean, a lot of the flare-up this week in terms of this conversation emanated out of the death of a number of workers who work for Jose Andres, big Democrat donor. They worked for his World Central Kitchen. They were doing food deliveries apparently in Gaza. And there were these 3 vehicles that were struck by the Israelis, and the Israelis are expressing regret over this and have announced today that they've fired 2 officers. They've reprimanded 3 others for their roles in the drone strikes in Gaza that killed these 7 aid workers, according to CBS News is reporting here. So Israel's responding to this. But one of the things, that it seems to be left out of a lot of the coverage is, like, do civilians die sometimes in these types of accidents? And the answer to that is yes. And also that the United States has done this. The United States has done this. And in fact, the Biden administration has done this in a pretty grotesque way. A lot of people remember, during the Afghanistan withdrawal, Biden drone striked an entire family in Afghanistan, killed a whole bunch of people, and they were guilty of nothing other than just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, this came out recently in hearings a couple of weeks ago with General McKenzie, and he still could not define clearly how the intelligence was so badly obtained to do the strike. And yeah, it was tragic, but he took an entire family out. Apparently, this parent was simply out trying to find water for his kids. So it's tragic, and I can't believe we're trying to hold the Israelis to a higher standard. Let me say something else here, Vince, has not been brought up, and it was not brought up in the press conference by John Kirby or Jean-Luc Picard-Pierre, whatever her name is, the other day when they talked about the call. The hostages. Right now, we have between 10 and 20 hostages, U.S. citizens, who are still being held.
That's right.
Not a word has been said by this administration or by anyone else saying, why aren't we actually focusing on getting our people back? Instead, what they're doing is pandering to a very small minority in the Democrat Party instead of doing those hard things of supporting the Israelis to get this done. The quickest way to get food to the people of Palestine is to have Hamas either defeated or surrender, either one. But the bottom line is, people are innocents are going to be killed incidental to combat operations.
Yes.
I think the Israelis have gone way out of their way to minimize this, and I'm sorry. It's tragic that these people were killed, but it's tragic that so many people were killed on the 7th of October, and the thing has gone on 6 months.
So, okay. Help me understand. I want to sort through some of the politics of this here in the United States, because you have on one side you have Joe Biden, on the other side Donald Trump is the alternative here. Trump has been he's been doing interviews lately, and when he's asked about this, he says that he'd like for this to be over quickly. I think everyone involved would like for it to be over quickly. I think the Israelis would like for it to be over quickly. He's been concerned about the PR here. He says that the images that are coming out of Gaza are being used against Israel and is not doing Israel favors. How do you assess kind of the competing positions here between Trump and Biden, and how different would it be with Trump as president?
I think Trump would have actually given all the resources and aid necessary to end the war more quickly. I think this is where they both want to end it, but I think Trump would be essentially cheering them on to end it quickly with a victory. Biden is simply trying to reward them with their bad behavior. Think about this, Vince. The one thing that came out of this call that they stated over and over on the podium, to include John Kirby, is they want a two-state solution. Vince, that's what Hamas is saying they want, although I don't think they want it. I think they're just saying that. But
they had one. It's called Gaza.
They had one. Yeah.
Gaza has been under Palestinian Arab control since the early 2000s. And it's become a hellhole under that control, and it became a terrorist staging ground under that control. So how is that providing a justification for a so-called two-state solution?
Well, but they want the immediate ceasefire and the ceasefire to be indefinite. So essentially, the difference is Trump would want them to be victorious and end it quickly. Biden wants ended now with no change of the fact that you would have Hamas as a terrorist organization. Or the other proposal on the table is to bring in the Palestinian Authority, who, by the way, teaches in their schools from the river to the sea. So it's basically apples to apples. You would not be replacing it with any organization that wants to see peace with the Israelis.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do. So the solution is victory for Trump, victory, done, lingering terrorist acts and continued pain by both the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, because Biden wants status quo, because that will give him the points necessary to he believes, to win re-election here in the United States. It's
so crazy. Okay, let me real quickly before you have to go here.
Sure.
I've got Secretary of State Antony Blinken, or Antony is apparently his name. Is your name Anthony or Antony, by the way, Tony Shaffer?
Mine is Anthony, but he's Anthony because he's more sophisticated than I am. I'm just a plebeian, you know.
You're just a regular old Anthony. He's Antony.
I'm just a regular old Anthony. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. He doesn't have time for the H. He's so important. He just has to blow past it. All right.
He's like a character in Zoolander, by the way. He's one of those guys by the runway. Just saying. You know.
Yeah, that's right. He's a brainless male model. Okay, Antony Blinken. He said yesterday Ukraine's got to become a member of NATO. It's going to become a member of NATO. Here he is.
Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership. And to create a clear pathway for Ukraine moving forward.
What is the strategic benefit of that statement?
It's to keep the Ukraine war from collapsing before the election. That's all it is. All this is a carrot being held out in front of the Ukrainians. Keep fighting. Don't let everything fall right now while, because I'm just telling you, Vince, the American public's been very badly misled about what's going on. The Russians have pretty much beat the Ukrainian military. They're preparing to return to the offensive. And all this is you all keep on fighting while we get the election redone. That's all this is. This, again, is a political construct designed to help the Biden administration win re-election. It has nothing to do with benefiting the Ukrainian people or actually trying to get them on a path to NATO membership. I'm just telling you, Vince, mark my words here.
So it's just a lie. It's just that, hey, the cavalry is coming. They keep promising, and that's not actually going to happen.
Yeah, get on that bridge, and as soon as you get on that bridge, we're going to let it go. So it's going to be like the Francis Scott Key Bridge. That's what.
For sure. Well, you've got. I mean, look, the whole idea behind American support for the Ukrainian side in this war was that we were going to diminish the Russian military's capacity, and yet here we have the State Department this very week saying, no, they're completely reconstituted now.
Yeah, the opposite is just think about this, Vince, as a summary of what we're talking about. Everything the Biden administration predicted on this war, the opposites happened. The sanctions strengthened the Russian economy. The Russian military is stronger than ever. And so it's in character with this administration to say one thing and see the exact opposite results no matter what.
Yeah, and hundreds of thousands of people are now dead as a result of that. Tony Shaffer, president of the London Center for Policy Research. Thank you for your time today, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Vince.
Look, I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is as likable as the next guy. Perfectly fine. But this idea that he wields like tremendous amounts of influence over the electorate is a self-delusion. It's what? Like, people are all, I can't vote until The Rock tells me who to vote for. Yeah. Well, he was on Fox this morning. He was doing an interview with Will Cain. And he said, he endorsed Biden in 2020. I think that's the first time he's ever made any endorsement in public. He was like, I'm going with Biden. It's a terrible decision. He says he's not going to make that mistake again. Take a listen.
Are you happy that you made that endorsement in 2020? Are you happy with the state of America?
Am I happy with the state of America right now? Well, that answer is no. Do I believe we're going to get better? I believe in that. I'm an optimistic guy, and I believe we can get better. The endorsement that I made years ago with Biden was one I thought was the best decision for me at that time. And I thought back then, when we talk about, hey, I'm in this position where I have some influence, and it's my job then. I felt like that then. It's my job now to exercise my influence and share with this is who I'm going to endorse. Am I going to do that again this year? That answer is no.
That answer is no. I'm not doing that anymore. That was Not a good idea. Over on The View, they're angry about all of this. I can't believe it. They think he's got influence.
So a couple of questions. First of all,
maybe they're not as relatives.
Yeah. So the question, first of all, should I pay any attention to who gives an interview on Fox where they lie every day? Yeah. Number one. Number two, should celebrities
have you seen The View?
Publicly endorse public figures? Or they should keep their
if they want to. I mean, celebrities are U.S. citizens or American citizens. You don't lose.
That's a weird statement. Celebrities are U.S. citizens.
Your rights as a citizen because you are a celebrity.
Joy Behar then starts talking about crazy Robert De Niro.
There's a huge risk for some of them.
Yes, there is.
Like
now's the time
like Robert De Niro, who's the most brilliant actor we've got.
What's the risk to him, other than just people realizing he's an idiot?
Presently, besides maybe Pacino and a few others like that. But he is out against Trump. Calls him names. He thinks he's a horrible. And people online write again that he's not a good actor. Oh, suddenly. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, and Marlon Brand. Yeah.
Oh, that's a huge risk.
He takes a risk by doing it.
People online might say you're not a good actor. Sonny Hostin had this to say.
And, he's been quite political. I agree with you. And he's been very engaged and very involved. I do think we're living in a time where we have someone running for president that is an existential threat to democracy.
Yeah, Biden.
Right? That is where we are at. Someone who has 88, criminal charges for
I feel like that number keeps changing, doesn't it?
Indictments. Someone that has vowed to be a dictator on the very first day he takes office. Now is the time. If you have a platform, you must be active. You must speak out. That's how I feel. And I generally don't think that celebrities should be forced.
By the way, this is Marxism, what she's describing. She wants to compel you. If you have a microphone, you have to join the party line or else.
To be politically active.
Not forced.
But right now, if you have a platform, you have an obligation.
Even Joy Behar was like, well, not forced. She's like trying to back Sonny off. Sonny cocked the shotgun. She's like, no. Forced. Forced. Coming up, we're going to chat with Josh Hammer about the left's war on the lawyers around Donald Trump and the effort to make sure they never have jobs again. Josh Hammer joins us next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 4:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we're going to talk solar eclipse with Jay Richards. He's the co-author of The Privileged Planet. Big conversation ahead at 5:30. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Obviously, Donald Trump, former president, perhaps future president of the United States, is under an all-out legal assault by the American left, looking to imprison him, in their view, hopefully before the election. But he's not the only one. Any number of American citizens have found themselves on the wrong end of Joe Biden's Department of Justice and all these Democrat prosecutors across the country. And there's a real legal effort afoot to go after the attorneys who represent people who are not on Biden's side of the political equation. In fact, Donald Trump's attorneys, people like who have worked either directly for him or in a government capacity, people like John Eastman or former U.S. Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark, are in the sights of the American left who are looking to destroy them and their legal careers. For more on this topic, I want to bring in Josh Hammer now. He's a senior editor-at-large of NewsWeek and the syndicated host of The Josh Hammer Show, and he joins us on the phone. Josh, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Tell me, if you will, about the saga of John Eastman and what is happening to him right now, because I feel like a lot of Americans just don't know that these attorneys are under an all-out assault by the left at this moment.
It is an un-American and Stalinist tale. That is where I will begin. So if you go back, Vince, John and I went to the same law school. We went to the University of Chicago Law School. I'm quite a bit younger than him, so we didn't overlap. But he's a pretty big deal in University of Chicago Law School alumni world. He's a pretty big deal in legal conservative world in general. He clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas back in the 90s. He was dean of Chapman University School of Law in Orange County, California for a long time. He published prolifically when it came to legal scholarship. He wrote on the Declaration of Independence, on birthright citizenship and the 14th Amendment. on the marriage question, you name it. I mean, he was a well-known conservative legal scholar, not merely
a real
lawyer,
lawyer,
scholar.
A real lawyer with real chops.
Yes, with very, very real chops. In a different universe, he could have easily been a federal judge. And after the 2020 November election, he decides to take on an unpopular client. That client, of course, is Donald J. Trump. And in the course of representing his client and zealously advocating for his client's interests the exact same way that I was taught in law school, the exact same way that any other law student who takes legal ethics in law school is taught, for that crime, for having the chutzpah to zealously represent his unpopular client, the then current president of the United States, he has been put through the ringer, Vince. They made him retire from the law school where he served as dean. They stripped him of his visiting scholarship position from the University of Colorado Boulder. They forced him to resign from various academic boards. People went to his neighborhood where he was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and put spikes in his driveway. They graffitied "Go Away, Insurrectionist" on the walls of a bridge in his community. As you mentioned, they're prosecuting him. Fonnie Willis is down in Georgia along with Jeffrey Clark. And now the latest is that last week they had this judge out in California issue a 128-page ruling arguing that his law license should now be stripped in California. And it's ultimately, Vince, the point that I try to make in my column today on this topic, it's ultimately not really about John Eastman or Jeffrey Clark. It's ultimately about trying to subjugate us and cow into submission the next generation of young right-of-center lawyers, young right-of-center law school students, the very folks that I speak to across the country when I speak on law school campuses as part of the Federal Society. It is trying to intimidate them out of joining the next Republican administration in any capacity, to make them unhireable. And it's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. And our side has to understand, Vince, that it's not about John and Jeff. This is so much bigger than them.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that sticks out to me is the fact that Trump is consulting attorneys during the change of government in 2020, going into early 2021, suggests immediately that it's not an insurrection. He's literally asking people to help him navigate the laws of the United States as he raises these challenges. John Eastman comes along and he's got, okay, well, let's take a look at the vice president's role and the Electoral College and how all of this operates. The left wants to destroy him for giving legal advice. I thought in the United States, even the most detestable person is entitled to a legal counsel.
Well, once upon a time, the American left agreed with that, Vince. I mean, go back to mid-20th century in the Jim Crow Deep South when the NAACP was righteously and correctly defending Black Americans who were subjugated by that horrible Jim Crow regime. Back then, the left understood very well that every American deserves legal representation, no matter how popular you are, no matter how you are viewed by the current government, by prevailing societal elites. In fact, as I noted in the column today, there's actually an even older precedent than that. It was 1770 in Boston, Massachusetts, the time of the Boston Massacre. Right. It was a then 35-year-old young lawyer named John Adams who decided that he was going to represent the Redcoats, the British soldiers who were accused of massacring the colonists there, simply to make the point that everyone deserves legal representation. And later on in his life, when he was nearing his death, John Adams famously remarked that he thought it was one of the greatest acts of public service he ever gave to his young country. So this is as old as, well, it's literally older than America, but the left has forgotten these lessons, tragically.
Of course. We provided attorneys to terrorists held in Guantanamo Bay. So yes. Should they be stripped of their law license for having represented enemies of America? Should we suggest that they are somehow terrorists themselves? This logic is insane, Josh Hammer.
It's patently insane, and it can only be understood as just the purest distillation of friend-enemy politics, which is that if you are a friend of the left, if you are a friend of the current regime that is in now power, if you are a friend of the current ruling class, then you are entitled to free speech, then you are entitled to platform access and social media, you are entitled to legal representation, you are entitled to all the various civil rights and liberties that a previous generation of Americans took for granted. But if you are an enemy, if you are part of what Angela Codevilla called the country class, as opposed to the ruling class, if you are one of what Hillary Clinton called the deplorables, then you will not have free speech. You will not have platform access. You will not have legal representation. And, oh, by the way, in this case, if you so much as consider if you so much as consider representing a high-profile Republican as his lawyer or going to work in the future Republican Department of Justice, you will have a permanent scarlet letter affixed to your resume that will make you unhireable by a big law firm. Look, Vince, as I mentioned, I'm a lawyer by training. I chat with my lawyer friends all the time. Many of them want to work in the next Republican administration if Trump wins, but they're genuinely reluctant to do so because they need to make sure that they're hireable after that, and they have families to feed and children to put food on the table for. These are real practical concerns for people.
This is not the first time I've heard this, by the way. And it's not just attorneys. It's anybody who's interested in helping the country out. People who are concerned about if should Trump return to the presidency, what is the left going to do to my reputation if I try and work in that administration? How should people approach that? What advice would you give them as they think through that decision?
So I don't think that there's such thing as one-size-fits-all advice. Everyone's going to have to assess the variables in their own situation and make their own decisions. And I think that we're going to have to, always respect that kind of decision. But to answer your question a little more substantively, I think the mid to long-term solution, and you're seeing this all throughout society. By the way, one thing that happened to John Eastman, and it's related to this point, I didn't even mention, he was also debanked. So within the past month, the Bank of America and the USAA both reached out to him and said you have 30 days to close your account, or else ... And I mentioned that because it's relevant to your question, which is everywhere you look across the country, whether it is debanking, whether it is deplatforming, increasingly, whether it is your doctor, your accountant, anyone, we are siloing ourselves into spheres based on political ideology. And it's not like both sides are doing this. The left is obviously overwhelmingly responsible for this descent into this two-tiered America, into this politically siloed off America. But in order to give our people, our side, broadly speaking, more reassurance, we're just going to have to create many more of our own institutions. We're going to have to create many more of our law firms. So there have been the rise, sticking to the legal setting, there has been the rise over the past 15, 20 years of a number of excellent stalwart conservative boutique law firms. Consovoy McCarthy, based right there in Washington, D.C., would be a great example of that. But we don't currently dominate any of the massive big law firms. And we're going to have to start really constituting and building up some of these alternative law firms, some of these alternative banks, platforms. I mean, that really increasingly has to be the solution. I just don't really know what else the option is.
Yeah. By the way, you said that John Eastman was debanked by Bank of America. Does not surprise me. They've done stuff like this before. But USAA, that's the military bank that I think probably a lot of people within the sound of my voice right now, they might bank with USAA. I didn't realize USAA had done that. Did you break that reporting today in Newsweek?
I did not. So what happened was it was last week there was an op-ed at Blaze Media, written by two of John's children, one of whom, Christina, I've been friends with for a number of years now. And they mentioned that in kind of a throwaway line towards the end of their own op-ed. But I was messaging with Christina, and she gently suggested that I go ahead and highlight that because she agreed, as you're also intimating, that didn't get the play that it deserved because it is a very big deal.
I'm reading it now. I missed it until you just mentioned it. They talked about all the impacts that John Eastman has experienced. His friends strip him of board memberships after decades of service. They suspend his membership in academic conferences, claiming he's a threat. They cancel his university classes and force him to retire. The Bank of America and USAA debank him. I wasn't aware of that until now. That's a black eye for that bank, USAA, and here it is. And it just that's horrifying. And I want to move before we run out of time here, Josh Hammer. I want to make sure to also get in the story of former U.S. Assistant Attorney Jeffrey Clark. He too is going through the ringer right now. What is that about? What can you tell us about that saga?
So in the aftermath of the 2020 election, unlike John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark was not a personal attorney to Donald Trump. He was just a fairly high-ranking DOJ official. So he was involved in the discussions about what to do pertaining to the slates of electors, just a broader conversation about whether we can kick it back to the state legislatures to consider the submission of alternative slates of electors. And he basically drafted a memo. He had a draft email that he had prepared to send to some of his DOJ colleagues. He didn't even send the memo. He literally didn't click the send button, if I understand the facts correctly. But nonetheless, the fact got out there that he had drafted this memo, which obviously the left tarred as an insurrectionist, democracy overthrowing memo. And it is the mere fact that he drafted this memo that is currently being used by the District of Columbia Bar, the D.C. Bar, to try to disbar him right there in Washington, D.C. In fact, the timing is funny. It was literally while I was drafting this column yesterday afternoon that I saw John Solomon at Just the News actually broke the story that the D.C. Bar had gone ahead and disciplined Jeffrey Clark literally yesterday afternoon. So there was a disciplinary panel there in the D.C. Bar that went ahead and found him guilty of an ethical violation, which is the first step towards a possible disbarment. So Jeff Clark and John Eastman both might be disbarred as a result of this. I obviously hope that is not the case. It is Stalinist, it's un-American, it's disgusting stuff. But that news broke literally yesterday.
And it's not for violating any laws. It's not for hurting anybody. It's for representing clients or giving legal advice.
That's correct. So the argument that they are making is that the legal advice ceases to be legal advice and becomes something else at some point. And, look, if I'm going to have a modicum of fairness here, that's obviously a truism, right? I mean, you can't issue legal advice to murder your neighbor. I mean, that's obviously true, but that's a ridiculous hypothetical. It's the exception rather than the rule. Within the confines of anything remotely resembling good faith argumentation, you have an ethical obligation to zealously advocate for your client's interest in a legal proceeding. And going back to Eastman for a second, what he was arguing, his specific interpretation of the 12th Amendment and calling for a more active rather than a passive role for the vice president in the counting and substantive consideration of the state's submission of their slates of electors, that was an issue of first impression. The United States Supreme Court has never interpreted that provision before. So he was well within his rights, Vince, is my feeling and has been my feeling all along. He was well within his rights to offer that line of advice to his legal clients obviously being Donald Trump.
Amazing. So the message of all of this, Josh Hammer, what these two guys in particular are experiencing right now, sounds to me is meant to be a warning to others should they ever want to give legal advice to someone who is politically unpopular or at least not a part of the ruling regime in the United States.
I think it is impossible to interpret it in any other way. And I know that personally, the next time that I'm out there on the law school speaking circuit, speaking to Federal Society chapters, Vince, I plan on just having casual conversations with some of the law students. I genuinely want to know on a personal level whether they're paying attention to this stuff, because I think that they are. I mean, based on my conversations with my friends who are not law students but young lawyers, they're absolutely paying attention to this. They're absolutely weighing this into their considerations for their future career plans. That is the clear and unambiguous message, and it is a chilling one. It is an un-American one, and our side has to do, I think, a much better job of telling these stories and sounding the alarm.
Josh Hammer with an important column on this subject today. He's the senior editor at large over at NewsWeek. Sir, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. An important topic. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got JT calling in from Washington, D.C., line one. JT, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Vince. I just heard when your interview that USAA debanked that lawyer for supporting Donald Trump and giving him advice.
John Eastman, yes. The family of John Eastman said in a piece last week for The Blaze that he was removed from both Bank of America as well as USAA. That's a detail that Josh Hammer, who I just spoke with, included in his Newsweek column today. So according to his own family, he's been debanked by USAA, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, I do believe that USAA needs to go the way of Bud Light. And I implore my federal veterans to boycott USAA. I have been a member for 20-plus years, and I am now actively looking for another insurance company.
We are reaching out as we speak, JT, to USAA for comment on this. We'd like to find out first and foremost, as always, whether or not it's true. The family says it is. And additionally, why? Why would you do that? Why would you remove him from, this is an insurance company, people have got money there. Why would you remove him from your insurance company? For what reason?
Well, as if I need another reason to really intently listen to your shows and interviews, I hope that they anxiously deny that.
Yeah, me
too. And reinstate the man.
Me too. We'll see what happens. JT, thank you. Thank you for the phone call. Yeah, that
Yep.
That definitely got my attention. Bank of America, we've heard that before. USAA, of all places, debanking John Eastman because he gave Donald Trump legal advice. That's insane. So we are reaching out to see what we can find out. Hang with us. Coming up in the next hour, Jay Richards joins us as the sun and the moon joined together to create a very interesting sight on planet Earth. He'll be talking about that solar eclipse coming up.